Nice tentacles, he said, and what the alien girl did next was shocking. Lawrence adjusted his dark steel combat vest, the material clinging uncomfortably to his muscular frame as he navigated the labyrinthine quids of the Galactic Coalition starship Asteria 3 weeks. Aboard this vessel, and he still felt like a fish out of water, the lone human in a sea of alien species. Damn. Translator, he muttered, tapping the small device pin to his collar. The thing had been glitching since yesterday, occasionally spitting out nonsensical translations that had already earned him confused looks from several crew members. As he rounded the corner toward the mess hall, he nearly collided with a slender figure. Quick reflexes allowed him to sidestep at the last moment, his broad shoulders barely missing the door frame. "Whoa, I'm sorry about that," Anthony said, his deep voice echoing slightly in the corridor. Before him stood one of the NY crew members, a humanoid female with striking turquoise skin that seemed to shimmer under the ship's lighting. Her most distinctive feature was the collection of elegant tentacle-like appendages that cascaded from her head like hair flowing past her shoulders in an almost hypnotic pattern. Her large, expressive blue eyes widened slightly at his sudden appearance. "Lieutenant Thalia." He acknowledged with a nod, recognizing her from the bridge crew heading to Mess Commander Lawrence. She replied with a formna. Her voice had that distinctive melodic quality all Nans possessed. "Yes, I was just about to have my midday meal." Anthony had been making a concerted effort to be friendly with the alien crew members, part of his unofficial mission as the first human liaison officer in this sector, the Coalition. Brass had made it abundantly clear that his performance would determine whether more humans would be assigned to these deep space postings. As they walked together toward the mess hall, Anthony noticed Thalia tentacle seemed to be arranged differently than usual, more intricate with subtle iridescent highlights, catching the light. Seeking to break the awkward silence and demonstrate his cultural awareness, Anthony cleared his throat. "Your tentacles look great today," he said with a friendly smile. "Did you do something different with them?" The effect was instantaneous and bewildering. Tia stopped dead in her tracks, her entire body going rigid, her blue eyes widened to an almost comical degree, and her mouth fell slightly open. The tentacles themselves seemed to ripple with a wave of color, flushing a deeper turquoise with hints of purple. What did you just say?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Anthony felt his stomach drop. Clearly he'd said something wrong, very wrong. Judging by her reaction, he mentally cursed his malfunctioning translator. "I just meant that he gestured vaguely toward her head. "They look nice today, different in a good way." He was rambling now, desperately trying to recover from whatever faux pas he'd committed. A small crowd of alien crew members had paused in the corridor, watching the exchange with undisguised interest. Anthony noticed several Nyans exchanging meaningful glances while a squat reptilian drone engineer was making no attempt to hide his amusement. "Commander Lawrence," Thalia finally said, her voice now oddly formal, "I think we should discuss this in private." Without waiting for his response, she turned and walked briskly toward a nearby conference room, her tentacles now pulsing with alternating bands of turquoise and deep violet. Anthony followed, acutely aware of the stares following them. As the door slid shut behind them, he ran a hand through his short dark hair, his thick beard doing little to hide his grimace look. "I clearly said something inappropriate, and I apologize." He began. "My translator's been on the fritz, and you said my tentacles look great today." Talia interrupted, her voice strangely calm. "Now yes, and I'm sorry if that was offensive in your culture. I was just trying to." "It wasn't offensive," she said, cutting him off again. "But do you understand what you actually said to me?" Anthony frowned, apparently not. Thalia's tentacles rippled again, and he could swear they were arranged in a pattern that somehow conveyed embarrassment. "In my language, the phrase you used, what your translator converted, doesn't mean what you think it means." She paused, seeming to search for the right words. "The closest translation would be your reproductive appendages appear ready for the mating ritual." Anthony felt the blood drain from his face, then rushed back with a vengeance. "Oh," he breathed, I didn't. I mean, I wasn't." Furthermore, she continued, her voice taking on an educational tone that somehow made the situation even more mortifying. "Such a declaration is traditionally only made by someone who is formally expressing romantic interest, and a desire to enter into a committed relationship. Anthony wanted nothing more than for the deck to open up and eject him into the cold vacuum of space. Thalia, I am so sorry. I had no idea my translator must have, to his surprise, a sound like tinkling bells filled the room. It took him a moment to realize that Thalia was laughing. Your face, she managed between peals of laughter. I've never seen a human turn that particular shade of red before. Despite his embarrassment, Anthony found himself chuckling. Well, I'm glad one of us is enjoying this. Her laughter subsided, but her eyes still sparkled with amusement. It's quite all right, Commander. Cultural misunderstandings are to be expected, though I must say this is certainly one. For the record books, please call me Anthony, he said, relief washing over him. And I'll be getting a new translator immediately. Anthony, she repeated the name, sounding exotic in her melodic voice. And you may call me Thalia. As they exited the conference room, Anthony was acutely aware that the story of his linguistic blunder would likely be all over the ship by the end of the day, but somehow, looking at Thalia's amused expression, he couldn't bring himself to care too much. What he didn't notice was the speculative glances from the other Narian as they walked past, or the way Thalia's tentacles continued to pulse with that distinctive violet hue, a color that, had he known Narian physiology better, would have told him volumes about her actual reaction to his accidental proposition. By the next morning, Anthony's linguistic blunder had spread through the Asteria faster than a plasma leak. He couldn't walk 10 steps without catching alien crew members whispering and glancing in his direction, and some even had the audacity to wink at him. At least, he assumed those strange eye movements were the alien equivalent of winking. I see your mating proposal is the talk of the ship, remarked Commander Drac, the Asteria burly Arcturian first officer. As Anthony entered the bridge, his growly voice carried just enough volume to ensure everyone heard. Anthony fought the urge to groan. It was a translator malfunction, sir. Of course it was. Drake replied with what passed for an Arcturian smile, a frightened display of serrated teeth, just like when I accidentally challenged the Relian ambassador to a death duel instead of complimenting his ceremonial robes. The bridge crew barely contained their amusement. As Anthony took a station, he noticed Thalia at her console studiously avoiding eye contact, the tips of her tentacles flushed with that same violet hue he'd noticed yesterday when his shift ended. Anthony was surprised to find Thalia waiting for him in the corridor. Commander Anthony, she corrected herself. I thought perhaps we could talk. He nodded, acutely aware of the curious glances from passing crew members. Lead the way. They ended up in one of the ship's observation lounges, mercifully empty at this hour. The vast panorama of stars stretched before them, the ship's warp field creating subtle distortions at the edges of the viewport. I wanted to apologize, Thalia said as they settled into seats. I should have been more discreet about our misunderstanding. Anthony shook his head. You've got nothing to apologize for. I'm the one who propositioned you by accident. Her tentacles rippled in what he was beginning to recognize as amusement. Yes, well, I thought perhaps I could help prevent future cultural incidents, a crash course in Narian customs. If you're interested, I'd appreciate that, he said sincerely, though I've already replaced my translator, and so hopefully no more accidental marriage proposals. That's probably for the best, she replied with a musical laugh, though I must admit, as far as proposals go, yours was rather memorable. There was something in her tone that made Anthony look at her more closely, the way her eyes held his gaze a beat longer than necessary, the subtle shift in her posture toward him. Were these signs of interest, or was he misreading alien body language again? So lesson 1 in Narian culture. Thalia began, her tentacles arranging themselves in an elegant pattern. These are not actually called tentacles. The proper term is neural filaments. They're sensory organs as much as they are well hair. I suppose from your perspective, neural filaments, Anthony repeated, fascinated. Despite his embarrassment, are they sensitive? Very. Something in her voice changed subtly. They can detect minute changes in air pressure, temperature, even electromagnetic fields. That's remarkable, he said, genuinely impressed. So when they change color like that, he gestured to the violet hue still visible at their tips. What does that mean? Tia's eyes widened slightly and the violet deepened. That's lesson 10 perhaps. Let's start With the basics for the next hour, she explained Narian customs, their formal greeting rituals, dining etiquette, and the complex social hierarchy. Based on neurofilament patterns, Anthony found himself leaning closer as she spoke. Captivated not just by the information but by her animated way of explaining things. What about human customs, she asked eventually. I've studied your species, but there's only so much one can learn from data files. Anthony smiled. What would you like to know? Your facial hair, she said, gesturing to his beard. Is it similar to our neural filaments? Does it serve a sensory function? He chuckled. Not exactly, it's mostly decorative these days, though it evolved as protection and warmth originally. May I? She asked. Raising a slender hand, Anthony nodded, suddenly very aware of his heartbeat as she reached forward. Her touch was feather light as she ran her fingers through his beard, her skin surprisingly warm against his fascinating texture. She murmured, her face closer to his than strictly necessary for scientific observation, much coarser than neural filaments, and much less sensitive, he said, his voice rougher than he intended. Her eyes met his and something unspoken passed between them. Her hand lingered on his jaw a moment longer before she withdrew it. I think I understand why humans touch so much now, she said softly. There's information in it that can't be conveyed any other way. The air between them seemed charged with possibility. Anthony found himself wondering what it would be like to kiss someone with turquoise skin, whether her lips would feel the same as a human's. The moment was shattered by the ship's intercom. Lieutenant Thalia to Xenobiology. Lieutenant Thalia to Xenobiology, she sighed, the sound musical even in its frustration. Duty calls. As she rose to leave, Anthony found himself saying, same time tomorrow for lesson 2. Thea paused at the door, her neural filaments now pulsing with bands of blue and violet. I'd like that. And Anthony, you might want to read up on what violet means in Narian physiology. Before then, with that cryptic statement, she was gone, leaving Anthony staring after her with a mixture of confusion and anticipation. He immediately pulled out his datapad and searched the ship's database for information on Narian neural filament coloration. When he found the entry for violet, his eyes widened, and a slow smile spread across his face. According to the database, violet was the color of attraction, interest, and desire. You've been invited to what? Anthony stared at Captain Renat, the Asteria Tarian commander, whose 4 eyes blinked at him in perfect synchronization. A formal reception at the Narian embassy on Proxima Station, she repeated, her translator rendering her clicking speech into standard. We're docking for resupply tomorrow, and the Narian ambassador specifically requested your presence. Anthony shifted uncomfortably. May I ask why, Captain? Apparently news of your cultural exchange with Lieutenant Alia has reached diplomatic channels. The captain's mouth parts twitched in what Anthony had learned was amusement. The ambassador is her maternal progenitor sibling, what humans might call an uncle. Anthony felt the blood drain from his face. Her uncle is the ambassador indeed, and he seems quite interested in meeting the human who has initiated pre-bonding rituals with his niece. It wasn't I didn't, Anthony stammered before collecting himself. Captain, it was a translator malfunction, so I've heard, she replied dryly, nevertheless declining, would cause significant diplomatic offense. Lieutenant Thalia will accompany you, of course. As if on QE, the bridge door slid open and Thalia entered. Her neural filaments were arranged in an intricate formal pattern, with delicate silver ornaments woven throughout. The sight momentarily robbed Anthony of speech. Lieutenant Thalia reporting as ordered. Captain, she said, her eyes briefly meeting Anthony's before focusing on their commander. I've just informed Commander Lawrence of your uncle's invitation. Captain Renara said I trust you can help him navigate the appropriate protocols. Of course, Captain. Was it his imagination, or did Thalia look slightly embarrassed after the captain dismissed them? They walked silently toward the turbo lift. Once inside, Thalia turned to him. I'm sorry, she said, I had no idea my uncle would hear about this. Narian family networks are extensive. Anthony ran a hand through his hair. So what exactly does he think is happening between us? Her neural filaments rippled with bands of blue. Embarrassment. He now knew in Narian culture, what you accidentally said to me would be considered the first stage of a formal courtship. My uncle likely believes we are exploring compass ability, and if we Show up and say it was all a misunderstanding. Thalia's filament darkened, it would be seen as you. Rejecting me after public declaration, my social standing would be affected. Anthony leaned against the turbo lift wall. So we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. There's a third option, she said. Quietly, we could not clarify the situation, immediately attend as if we were indeed exploring a potential bond. It would only be for one evening. The turbolift doors open, but neither moved to exit. You'd be willing to do that? Anthony asked, studying her face. It would be the path of least complication, she replied, though her neural filaments were now pulsing with that telling violet hue. The next evening found them approaching the Narian embassy on Proxima Station. Thalia, race-splendid in flowing robes of deep blue that complemented her turquoise skin. Anthony wore his formal coalition uniform, which Thalia had assured him would be appropriate. Remember, she murmured as they approached the entrance, physical contact between potential bondmates is expected to be minimal and dignified in public. A hand on the arm or shoulder is acceptable. Anything more would be considered inappropriate. Understood, Anthony replied. Offering his arm in what he hoped was an appropriately dignified manner, she placed her hand on his forearm, her touch sending an unexpected warmth through him. Despite the formality of the gesture, the embassy interior was a marvel of organic architecture, with walls that seemed to flow like liquid and ceilings that rippled with bioluminescent patterns. Naians of various ages moved through the space with fluid grace, their neural filaments adorned with ornaments that Anthony now understood indicated social status and family lineage. Thalia, a distinguished Narian male, approached, his neural filaments arranged in an elaborate pattern similar to Thalia, and this must be the human who has been causing such a stir. Uncle Nereus. Thalia greeted him with a formal gesture. May I present Lieutenant Commander Anthony Lawrence of Earth. Anthony, this is Ambassador Nereus, my maternal progenitor's sibling. Anthony executed the Narian greeting Thalia had taught him, a subtle inclination of the head, with hands pressed together. Ambassador. It's an honor. The honor is mine. News replied, studying Anthony with undisguised curiosity. You're the first human to initiate bonding rituals with an Hillen. Quite historic, Anthony felt. Thalia's grip tightened slightly on his arm. I find your niece's company enlightening, he said carefully as she finds yours clearly. Nereus observed, his gaze dropping to where Thalia's hand rested on Anthony's arm. Come, you must meet the others. There's considerable interest in your potential union. As they moved through the gathering, Anthony became acutely aware of the stares and whispers following them. Thalia remained close, occasionally translating cultural nuances. The universal translator missed there, discussing your physical attributes, she whispered, after one group of elderly Nans had finished examining Anthony with unabashed interest. There impressed by your musculature. Narian males are typically more slender. Should I be flattered or uncomfortable? He murmured back. Both, she replied with a musical laugh that drew even more attention. The evening progressed with a series of formal introductions and ritual exchanges that left Anthony's head spinning throughout it all. Thalia remained a constant presence at his side, her hand rarely leaving his arm. He found himself increasingly aware of each touch, each moment. Their bodies drew close during a momentary respite. They found themselves alone in a small alcove overlooking the station's spectacular view of the nearby nebula. You're doing remarkably well, Thalia said, her voice soft. My family is impressed. I'm just following your lead, he replied honestly, though I'm not sure how much longer I can keep up the charade. Her neural filaments pulsed with a complex pattern he couldn't interpret. Is it entirely a charade, Anthony? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Before he could respond, Ambassador Nereus appeared at the entrance to their alcove. Ah, there you are, he said, his tone knowing. I hate to interrupt, but the bonding dance is about to begin. As our honored guests, you're expected to participate. Anthony looked at Thalian. Alarm bonding dance. Her neural filaments flushed deep violet. It's traditional for couples exploring compatibility. It's rather intimate by Narian standards. How intimate are we talking? Anthony asked as they followed Nereus back to the main hall. You'll need to touch my neural filaments, she whispered in public. The significance wasn't lost on him. After their cultural lessons, he knew exactly how sensitive those appendages were and what such contact symbolized in Narian society. As they took their position among other couples, Thalia guided his hands to the proper position, her eyes never leaving his. Just follow my movements, she murmured, and Anthony, that third option I mentioned, I'm beginning to think it might not be just for one evening. The music began, and as his fingers gently entwined with her neural filaments, Anthony realized their diplomatic pretense had evolved into something far more genuine and complicated than either had anticipated. The bonding dance was unlike anything Anthony had experienced. As his fingers gently caressed Thalia's neurofilaments, he felt them respond, curling around his fingers, pulsing with warmth that seemed to flow directly into his skin. The sensation was electric, intimate in ways that transcended physical touch. Alia's eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow, as they moved together in the intricate patterns of the dance around them. Other Narian couples performed the same ritual, but Anthony was aware only of Thalia. Subtle changes in her expression, the deepening violet of her neural filaments, the way her body swayed closer to his. With each movement, "Is this?" he whispered, struggling to maintain the dignified composure expected in public. "Normal, no," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "This reaction is unusual, intense." The music built to a crescendo, and as it did, Anthony felt a strange resonance building between them, as if their nervous systems were somehow synchronizing. When the final notes faded, they remained frozen in place, his fingers still entwined in her neural filaments, her hands resting on his shoulders. A ripple of murmurs spread through the gathered. Narian Ambassador Narrows approached, his expression a mixture of surprise and satisfaction. "Most impressive," he said, studying them both. "Oh, such harmony in a first bonding dance is rare, especially between different species." Before either could respond, Naras turned to address the assembled guests. "Honored friends, we have witnessed something extraordinary tonight. The neural resonance displayed by my niece and Commander Lawrence suggests exceptional compatibility." Anthony felt Thalia tense beside him. Therefore, Naras continued, "As senior family representative, I formally acknowledge their pre-bonding status and invite them to proceed to the compatibility trials at their earliest convenience." A chorus of approving sounds filled the hall. Anthony maintained his diplomatic smile while mentally scrambling to understand what had just happened. What did he just do? He whispered to Thalia as they accepted congratulations from approaching guests. "He's officially recognized our courtship," she replied through a fixed smile. "We've just been upgraded from casually exploring compatibility to formally pre-bonded, and the compatibility trials a series of rituals to determine if we're suited for permanent bonding." Her neural filaments rippled with complex emotions. They're rather thorough. Before he could ask for clarification, they were swept into a whirlwind of ceremonial congratulations. It was nearly an hour before they could politely extract themselves, pleading duty obligations back on the Asteria. As they walked back toward the docking bay, Anthony's mind raced. Thalia, the station's emergency clacks and cut him off. Red warning lights pulsed along the corridors as an automated voice announced, "Warning. Environmental system malfunction in Section 12, all personnel evacuate immediately." "That's where we are," Thalia said, looking around as panicked civilians began rushing past them. Anthony's training kicked in. "Which way? To the nearest emergency shelter." "This way," Thalia pointed. Already moving, they ran against the flow of evacuees, helping direct confused civilians toward safety. As they rounded a corner, they encountered a sealed door with warning lights. "Life support is failing in there," Thalia said, checking a nearby status panel. "Oxygen levels dropping. Are there people inside?" Anthony asked, already examining the manual. "Override." Thalia checked the panel. "Yes, 3 Narian children. Their life signs are weakening." Without hesitation, Anthony pried open the emergency panel and began the manual override sequence. "I can get this open, but the atmosphere will rush out. We'll need emergency breathers." "I don't need one," Thalia said. "Nians can survive without oxygen for approximately 8 minutes." "Ah, that's convenient," Anthony remarked as he located an emergency kit and pulled out a breather mask. "Not convenience, evolution," she replied. "Our home world has seasonal oxygen fluctuations." The door slid open with a hiss of escaping air. Thalia darted inside while Anthony secured his breather. He followed her into the darkened chamber where 3 small Nean children huddled together, their neural filaments pale with fear. Working together, they quickly evacuated the children to safety. As the last emergency teams arrived, Anthony and Thalia found themselves in a quiet Carter, adrenaline still coursing through their systems. That was impressive, Thalia said, studying him with new appreciation. Most beings would have evacuated themselves. Just doing my job, he replied, though her admiration warmed him. It's more than that. Her neural filaments pulsed with that now familiar violet. You risked yourself for Narian children without hesitation. It's exactly what a bondmate should do. The intensity in her eyes sent a jolt through him. Without conscious thought, he reached out to touch her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her neural filaments extending toward him of their own accord. We should talk about what happened at the embassy, he said softly. About what your uncle announced? Yes, she agreed, making no move to step away, but not here. They made their way back to the Asteria in charged silence. When they reached her quarters, Thalia hesitated only briefly before inviting him inside. The room was bathed in soft blue light that complemented her turquoise skin. Delicate sculptures of what appeared to be a Narian sea life adorned the walls, and the air carried a subtle, pleasant scent he couldn't identify. About the pre-bonding announcement, Thalia began, her neural filaments arranging themselves in a formal pattern. I want you to know you're under no obligation. We can inform my uncle of the misunderstanding and your social standing, Anthony asked, remembering her earlier concern. I'll manage, she said, though her filaments betrayed her discomfort. It would be unfair to trap you in Narian customs because of a translator error. Anthony stepped closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. What if I don't feel trapped? Her eyes widened, neural filaments instantly flushing deep violet. Anthony, the dance, he said, his voice low. That connection we felt, was that real or just part of the ceremony? It was real, she whispered, more real than anything I've experienced, but cross-species bonding is rare. Complicated? I'm not afraid of complicated, he said, closing the distance between them. I'm more afraid of walking away from something that feels this significant because it doesn't fit neatly into either of our cultures. Her neural filaments reached for him, curling gently around his wrist. The compatibility trials would tell us if this is possible. They're designed to test physical, emotional, and psychological harmony. Then let's do them, Anthony said, surprising himself with his certainty. You don't understand, Thalia replied, her filaments pulsing with complex emotions. The first trial is physical union. It's intimate. It would require us to understanding dawned. Oh yes, she said, her eyes never leaving his. Oh, that between them seemed to vibrate with possibility. Anthony's heart hammered in his chest as he made his decision. I'm willing if you are, he said softly. Her answer came not in words but in the way her neural filaments entwined more firmly with his arms, drawing him closer until their bodies were separated by mere inches. There are differences in our physiologies, she murmured, her breath warm against his face, but the basics are compatible. Anthony smiled. I think we've already proven we're good at overcoming cultural and biological differences. Her answering laugh was musical, vibrating through him like the sweetest melody. As their lips finally met, Anthony realized that his accidental compliment about her tentacles had led him to the most unexpected and wonderful destination of all. Anthony woke to the gentle caress of neural filaments against his bare chest. For a moment, he simply watched Thea sleeping beside him, her turquoise skin luminescent in the dim light of her quarters. The events of the previous night replayed in his mind, the surprising compatibility of their bodies, the unexpected intensity of their connection, the way her neural filaments had responded to his touch with pulses of bioluminescence that had bathed them both in ethereal light. He never experienced anything like it. Human intimacy suddenly seemed one dimension by comparison. Thalia stirred, her eyes fluttering open when she saw him watching her. Her neural filaments instantly flushed deep violet. Good morning, she murmured, her musical voice slightly husky. Morning, he replied, reaching out to stroke her cheek. That was yes, she agreed, understanding his unfinished thought. It was they shared a moment of comfortable silence before Thalia suddenly sat up, her neural filaments rippling with alarm. What's wrong? Anthony asked. Look, she said, extending her arms. Faint patterns of blue were appearing on her turquoise skin, intricate swirls and whirls that hadn't been there the night before. Is that normal? He asked, gently tracing one of the patterns with his fingertips. She shook her head. This is a bonding pattern. It typically only appears after the Third compatibility trial, not the first. Her eyes met his wide with concern and never this quickly before Anthony could respond. His communicator chirped. Commander Lawrence to the bridge. Immediately came Captain Renard's voice. They dressed, quickly exchanging concerned glances as they prepared to leave. Talia grabbed his arm. We should keep this between us until we understand what's happening, she said, gesturing to the patterns on her skin. Fortunately, her uniform covered most of them. Anthony nodded, agreed. Let's meet in the medical bay after our shifts. The moment they stepped onto the bridge, Anthony knew something was amiss. The entire bridge crew turned to stare at them, expressions ranging from curiosity to outright amusement. Commander Lawrence, Lieutenant Thalia, Captain Remark greeted them all, four eyes blinking in what Anthony had learned was suppressed humor. I understand. Congratulations are in order. Anthony felt his face heat. Captain Ambassador Naras has formally notified Coalition Command of your pre-bonding status, she explained. Apparently it's the diplomatic milestone, the first human Narian bond in recorded history. Commander Dravik snorted from his station, and to think it all started with a translator malfunction. The bridge erupted in poorly concealed laughter. Anthony maintained his composure, though. He noticed Thalia's neural filaments had contracted close to her head, a sign of embarrassment. We were going to inform you, Captain, Thalia said formally. Events progressed rather rapidly, so IG rather. The captain replied dry. While I appreciate the boost to interspecies relations, I expect both of you to maintain professional decorum aboard my ship. Yes, Captain, they replied in unison. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of knowing glances and whispered comments. By midday, Anthony's patience was wearing thin. When he finally met Thalia in the medical bay, he was relieved to find it empty except for Dr. Prell, the ship's Andorian physician. Ah, the happy couple, the doctor greeted them, his antenna twitching with interest. What brings you to my domain? Thalia hesitated, then rolled up her sleeve to reveal the patterns, now more pronounced than before. These appeared this morning. They Narian bonding patterns, but they shouldn't be present yet. Dr. Prell's antennae straightened in surprise. Fascinating. He ran a medical scanner over her arm. And you're concerned because they typically only appear after the third compatibility trial, she explained. We've only completed the first. The doctor's eyes widened slightly. I see. And have you experienced any other symptoms? Dizziness, disorientation? Thalia hesitated. A slight headache, and I've been unusually aware of Commander Lawrence's presence even when he's not in the same room. Dr. Prell nodded thoughtfully. Commander, have you experienced anything unusual? Anthony considered. Now that you mention it, I've had moments today where I could swear I knew exactly what Lieutenant Thalia was thinking. The doctor's antennae quivered with excitement. Remarkable. It appears you've initiated a neural bond far more rapidly than is typical for Narian. He consulted his scanner again. Lieutenant, your biochemistry is showing significant changes. Your neural filaments are producing a new type of neurotransmitter that appears to be compatible with human brain chemistry. Is it dangerous? Anthony asked, concern evident in his voice. Not immediately, Dr. PR replied, but I'd like to consult with a Narian specialist. This is unprecedented. My aunt is a neural specialist. Talia said she's currently stationed on Proxima. Excellent. I'll arrange a consultation. The doctor looked between them. In the meantime, you should proceed with the second compatibility trial if your bodies have already begun the bonding process. Attempting to halt it now could have negative consequences. After the doctor left to make arrangements, Anthony took Thalia's hand. Are you okay with this? Everything's happening so fast. Her neural filaments reached out to caress his wrist. I'm surprised but not displeased. Are you having second thoughts? No, he said, realizing it was true. Just concerned about you. These changes in your body are natural, just accelerated, she assured him. The second trial might help stabilize the process. The mental bonding ritual, he asked, remembering their earlier conversation. She nodded. It's designed to align neural patterns between bondmates. Given what's already happening, it might actually help regulate these changes. Anthony squeezed her hand. Then let's do it tonight. Tonight, she agreed, her neural filaments pulsing with that now familiar violet hue as they left the medical bay. They were so absorbed in their conversation that they nearly collided with Commander Drav. Watch where you're going, Love B, he growled, though there was no real malice in his tone. Sorry, Sir, Anthony replied. Automatically, Doctor studied them both, his reptilian eyes narrowing word of advice. The crew's placing bets on how long this will last. Interspecies relationships rarely do, especially when they start. With a misunderstanding, Anthony felt Thalia stiffen beside him. With all due respect, sir, he said evenly, what's happening between Lieutenant Thalia and me, as genuine regardless of how it began. The Arcturian expression softened slightly. For your sake, I hope so, because from what I hear, Narian bonding isn't something you can walk away from easily. He nodded curtly and continued down the corridor. Is that true? Anthony asked once Draic was out of earshot about Narian bonding being difficult to reverse. Thalia's neural filaments rippled with complex emotions once fully established. Yes, that's why the compatibility trials exist, to ensure both parties are truly suited before the bond becomes permanent. And if we're not compatible, then the second trial will show us, she said simply. The mental bonding will reveal our true thoughts and feelings to each other. There can be no deception, no uncertainty afterward. The prospect was both terrifying and exhilarating. Complete mental transparency with another being. Anthony had never imagined such intimacy was possible tonight. Then he said, bringing her hand to his lips in a gesture that earned them curious glances from passing crew members. As they parted ways, neither noticed the faint blue patterns beginning to appear on Anthony's skin, mirroring those on Thalia's. Thalia's quarters were transformed bioluminescent orbs floated near the ceiling, casting a soft pulsating glow that reminded Anthony of Earth's auroras. The air was infused with a subtle fragrance, something like cinnamon and sea salt, that she explained was trad for Narian bonding rituals. Are you sure we should be doing this without supervision? Anthony asked as Thalia arranged cushions in the center of the room. How the first trial accelerated things, she looked up, her neural filaments arranged in a pattern he now recognized as determination. My aunt reviewed Dr. Prell's findings. She believes the mental bonding will actually help stabilize our connection. Anthony nodded, though anxiety nodded him. The blue patterns on his skin had spread throughout the day, mirroring Thalia, a development that had both fascinated and alarmed Dr. PR. So how does this work? He asked, settling onto one of the cushions. Thalia knelt opposite him, her neural filaments extending toward him like delicate tendrils seeking connection. We touch forehead to forehead. Interstellar diplomatic incident. Anthony couldn't help but laugh, marveling at how she could ease his tension so effortlessly through their bond. He felt her genuine amusement, and beneath it a deep contentment that mirrored his own. The 3 days before the ceremony passed in a whirlwind of preparations and briefings. The Earth delegation arrived with a team of Zobai biologists, cultural specialists, and diplomatic observers. To Anthony's surprise, his parents were among them, a gesture arranged by Admiral Charles that went a long way toward softening his attitude toward the man. They're absolutely fascinated by the pattern, his mother whispered, examining the blue markings on his skin during a private moment. But more importantly, are you happy? Anthony glanced across the room where Thea was deep in conversation with his father, her neural filaments animated as she explained something about Narian architecture through their bond. He felt her genuine enjoyment of the conversation. Happier than I ever thought possible, he answered honestly. The day of the ceremony arrived with all the pomp and circumstance of a major diplomatic event. The Grand Hall of the Narian Embassy was filled with representatives from a dozen species, all gathered to witness the historic bonding. Anthony stood at the entrance in traditional Night Aryan ceremonial attire, flowing robes of deep blue that complemented the markings on his skin through their bond. He felt Thea's approach before he saw her when she appeared, escorted by Ambassador Neris. A hush fell over the assembly. She was radiant in silver white robes, her neural filaments adorned with delicate crystals that caught the light with every movement. The blue patterns on her skin seemed to pulse in harmony with his own. As they took their positions in the center of the hall, Anthony was acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes upon them. Human, Narian, and a dozen other species, yet through their bond he felt only Thala's presence. Steady and sure, Ambassador Nereus began the ceremony in the ancient Narian language. His words translated for the non-Narian guest. He spoke of bonds that transcended physical form, of the courage to embrace difference, of the strength found in unity. The third trial, he announced, is traditionally a public declaration of Intent followed by the exchange of life essence. He turned to Anthony for Narian. This involves the intertwining of neural filaments. For this unprecedented bonding, we have adapted the ritual and attendant. Brought forward a small crystal vessel containing a luminescent blue liquid. This contains essence from both your genetic material Naris, explained, modified to be compatible with both physiologies. The sharing of it will complete your physical bonding. Anthony felt a moment of uncertainty through their connection, which Thalia answered with reassurance. It's safe. Her thoughts conveyed, my aunt supervises creation. The ritual proceeded with an exchange of vows. Anthony, speaking in carefully practiced Naren, Thalia, responding in perfect English. When they each drank from the crystal vessel, Anthony felt a warmth spread through him, the blue patterns on his skin glowing in response. Then came the moment that hadn't been rehearsed. Acting on instinct guided by their bond, Anthony reached out to gently touch Thalia's neurofilaments. They responded immediately, curling around his fingers. As they had during their first dance, a gasp went through the assembly as the filaments began to glow with an intensity that illuminated the entire hall. Through their bond, Anthony felt Thalia's surprise and joy. This reaction was unprecedented, a visible manifestation of their connection that transcended both human and Narian. Biology ambassador Nuz's voice, and when he continued, held a note of awe. The bonding is complete. What began as a misunderstanding has become a bridge between our peoples. The formal reception that followed was a blur of congratulations and curious questions. Scientists from both Earth and Nyar were particularly interested in the visible manifestation of their bond, the matching patterns on their skin, and the unprecedented reaction of Thalia's neurofilaments. They're already talking about a new field of study at Adal. Charles told them, his earlier skepticism replaced by cautious optimism. Xena harmonics, they're calling it, the study of cross-species compatibility. So we're a scientific breakthrough now? Anthony asked with a raised eyebrow. You're a symbol of possibility, Charles corrected. Do you have any idea how many diplomatic doors this opens? Species that have been hesitant to engage with humans are suddenly interested in talks later, as they finally found a moment of alone on a balcony overlooking the station's spectacular view. Thalia's neural filaments gently caressed Anthony's face. Quite the journey from your tentacles. Look great today, she mused, her eyes sparkling. Anthony laughed, pulling her closer. Best translator malfunction in the history of inter-species relations. Through their bond, he felt her amusement, affection, and a depth of connection that words could never adequately express. Where do we go from here? He asked softly. Her neural filaments pulsed with that now familiar violet hue. Wherever we choose. The Asteria, Earth, Nyar, it doesn't matter. Her eyes met his. Home is no longer a place for either of us. As their lips met, Anthony reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had led them here. A chance encounter, a linguistic mistake in the courage to embrace the unexpected had changed not only their lives, but potentially the future of human-alien relations, and it had all begun with a simple misunderstood compliment about her tentacles. The end. Hands clasped. The neural resonance established during our first bonding will deepen, allowing our minds to connect, and we'll be able to read each other's thoughts. The idea was both exhilarating and terrifying. Not exactly, it's more like sharing consciousness. Emotions, memories, core beliefs. Her eyes met his. There can be no secrets in the bonding. Anthony, are you prepared for that? He swallowed hard. Will you see everything, every memory, every thought I've ever had? No, she assured him. Primarily, what defines you? Formative experiences, deeply held beliefs, emotional truths. Her neural filaments rippled with gentle humor. Your embarrassing adolescent moments are safe. That drew a laugh from him, easing some of his tension. Good to know there is one thing, she added, her tone growing serious. The bonding is bidirectional. Just as I will see into your mind, you will see into mine. Narian consciousness is different from human consciousness. It might be disorienting. I'm ready, he said with more confidence than he felt. Thea extended her hands. Palms up. Anthony placed his hands in hers, feeling the now familiar tingle. Where their skin touched, the blue patterns on their arms seemed to pulse in unison. Close your eyes, she instructed. Softly focus on your breathing. As their foreheads touched, Anthony felt a sudden rush like plunging into warm water. Colors swirled behind his closed eyelids, and then he was Thalia. He felt the constant awareness of her neural filaments, thousands of sensory inputs. He had no framework to process. He experienced the world through her perceptions, colors beyond the human spectrum, subtle vibrations in there that carried meaning, the constant hum of the ship's systems that humans couldn't detect. Simultaneously, he felt her presence in his mind, her wonder at the intensity of human emotions, the strange linearity of his thought processes, the constant internal monologue that Narian lacked. Then came the memories. Thalia as a child learning to control her neurofilaments, her first day at the Coalition Academy, the only Narian in her class, the mixture of curiosity and loneliness that had defined her early career. He felt her first impression of him, her surprise at his physical form so different from Narian males, the confusion and unexpected thrill when her had accidentally propositioned her, the gradual shift from amusement to genuine interest as they'd spent time together, and then unexpectedly he encountered resistance, a wall in her mind. Beyond it, he sensed fear, uncertainty. What are you afraid of? He thought. Losing myself, came her response, not in words but in pure concept. The bonding changes us both, but I am the first Narian to bond with a human. What if I become something neither Narian nor human? What if I lose my connection to my people? Anthony understood suddenly. You're afraid of becoming too human, yes. And then with startling clarity, he realized his own fear mirrored hers. Deep in his consciousness, he'd been harboring the same concern that in bonding with Thalia he might lose something essentially human. He opened himself fully to her, letting her see the shared fear. Were both afraid of the same thing. He felt her surprise, then understanding, then something like laughter rippling through their connected minds. We fear becoming less when perhaps we are becoming more, she thought. Images flowed between them, possibilities of what they might become together, neither fully human nor fully Narian, but something new, something with the potential for beauty and understanding beyond either of their species. Alone, the fear didn't vanish, but it transformed, becoming something they shared rather than something that divided them. As the mental connection deepened, Anthony became aware of the blue patterns on his skin glowing in harmony with Tha's. The sensation was extraordinary, as if their bodies were having a conversation separate from their minds. Time lost meaning. They could have been connected for minutes or hours when Anthony became aware of a new presence in their shared consciousness. Something ancient and vast, the ancestral memory Thalia's thoughts explained. All Nans carry echoes of those who came before. The presence examined their bond with what felt like curiosity, then approval. Anthony had the distinct impression of being welcomed not just by Thalia but by generations of Nyans stretching back millennia. When they finally separated, Anthony was trembling. Thalia's neural filaments were glowing with a brilliant light that illuminated the entire room. That was, he began finding words inadequate. Yes, she agreed, understanding perfectly. They sat in silence, processing the experience. The blue patterns on their skin had stabilized, no longer spreading, but now permanently etched into their flesh, a visible symbol of their mental connection. I felt your fear, Thalia said. Finally, about losing your humanity. Anthony nodded. And I felt yours. About your Narian identity, yet we both saw the possibility of becoming something more, she said, her neural filaments arranging themselves in a pattern he now understood represented hope. The ancestral memory accepted me, he marveled. I didn't expect that. Thalia smiled. Nor did I. It's unprecedented. Her expression grew thoughtful. Perhaps our fears were unfounded. Perhaps we don't lose ourselves in this bonding but gain aspects of each other. Anthony reached out to touch her face, feeling the echo of her emotions through their new connection. I can still feel you, he said wonderingly, not as intensely as during the ritual, but you're there at the edge of my thoughts. The bond has stabilized, she confirmed. It will continue to develop, but more gradually. Now her neural filaments reached out to caress his wrist. How do you feel? Still human? He considered the question seriously. Yes, but also more like I've gained an entirely new sense. He smiled. Is this how the third trial usually goes? No, she laughed. The third trial is typically a public ceremony, a formal declaration before both families. Her neural filaments rippled with amusement. Though given how we've accelerated through the first two trials, perhaps we should expect the Unexpected, as if on cue, the ship's alert system activated senior officers to the bridge. Unidentified vessel. Approaching, they exchanged a look that contained volumes concern our resignation and a touch of humor at the interruption duty calls. Anthony sighed. Rising to his feet as they headed for the bridge, he was acutely aware of Thalia's presence beside him, not just physically but mentally. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. Their accidental beginning having evolved into something neither could have imagined, and it had all started with a simple compliment about her tentacles. The unidentified vessel turned out to be the U's Horizon and Earth diplomatic ship. Anthony stood at attention on the Asteria bridge as the communication screen flickered to life, revealing a stern-faced human admiral. Admiral Charles, Captain Renara greeted. "This is unexpected, Captain," the admiral nodded. "Curly, we're here regarding the reported human Narian bonding Earth Central Com and has why concerns." Anthony felt Thalia's anxiety through their bond before he even glanced at her. Her neurofilaments had contracted close to her head, a defensive posture he now understood intimately. "Commander Lawrence and Lieutenant Thalia are two of my finest officers," Captain Renara stated firmly. "Their personal relationship has not affected their duties." Admiral Charles's expression remained impassive. "This isn't about performance reviews, Captain. This is the first documented human-Narian bond. There are diplomatic, medical, and cultural implications that must be evaluated." Anthony stepped forward with respect. "Admiral, our relationship isn't a scientific curiosity or a diplomatic incident. No one suggesting it is," Commander Charles replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But surely you understand the significance. We've assembled a delegation of experts to observe the final compatibility trial." Through their bond, Anthony felt Thalia's mixture of indignation and resignation. The third trial was meant to be intimate, a celebration with close family, not a spectacle for bureaucrats and scientists. Admiral Anthony began, but Captain Renara cut him off with a subtle gesture. "We would be honored to host Earth's delegation," she said. Diplomatically, Ambassador Narrows has already arranged for the third compatibility trial to take place on Proxima Station in 3 days after the communication ended. Anthony turned to Thalia. "I'm sorry, this isn't how it should be." Her neural filaments reached out to brush his hand, a gesture now loaded with meaning. "After their mental bonding, it's not ideal, but perhaps it's necessary. Our bond is unprecedented. It makes sense that both our peoples would want to understand it. Still, to turn our final trial into a diplomatic spectacle," she smiled, sending a wave of warmth through their connection. "The ceremony is just formality now. Our true bonding has already occurred." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Besides, think of the story we'll have to tell." He told the alien girl her tentacles looked great, and 3 weeks later they were the center of an